Hello again, YouTube and privileged ones, and welcome back to a part 2 of how to build Outbreak Prime. We've got a bunch of parts here, 2 of which I've actually taken 4 parts and brought them into 2 pieces, and then we're also going to have to bring these 2 pieces into a full, complete piece. But what we're doing is we're trying to do part 2 where we're setting up several pieces that have to be one piece. And then from there, we're going to go into episode 3 and teach you how to sand, prime, and bondo all of these pieces. But I want you to have a rough idea of how to do this step because this one's really crucial to putting the entire model together. So whatever model you have, there's some parts that you'll have to distinguish between all the other parts on which ones you're going to put together. So today we're going to put the backstop together, and it's 2 halves. So we'll put these together. We will also be putting most of the gun barrel together because these are all a bunch of pieces, and what happens is when the 3D printer is printing, it only prints several sections, and then you've got to put together the rest of the model later. So ultimately, we're going to put all this stuff together, and we're going to teach you how to do that. So first step is pretty much going through your entire model, picking the parts that you do want to have in bigger pieces, and then from there you're going to want to go and purchase 5-minute epoxy. 5-minute epoxy comes in a tube like this, or a even bigger tube that's available. It's a little more expensive, but this one I believe is like $3.97 at Walmart. You can purchase it at Lowe's or any other hardware store, Home Depot, or I will also leave a link in the description of this video that you can go and purchase it online from Amazon. So 5-minute epoxy. Really cool thing is it comes in 2 parts, and you squeeze it equally onto something that you want to mix it together on. So I'm using a little scrap board. As you can see, there's some 5-minute epoxy here, and what we do is we squeeze it evenly. There's going to be 2 equal parts of both tubes. We're going to take our little stirrer stick, we'll stir it together, and then from there we have about 3.5 to 4 minutes to apply it to the model and put the 2 pieces together, and then after that it is set. If you wasted that time, then the epoxy is going to harden. You only have a small window to get the epoxy on one of the sides and put these together. So we're going to show you with some pieces, multiple pieces. So we're going to get to that right now. Okay, now that we have all of the stuff on the desk and ready, we have a bunch of pieces that we have to glue together. We are going to ultimately show you how to mix 5-minute epoxy on the little board that I have on the desk, and we're going to glue together several pieces of the Outbreak Prime that were 3D printed straight from a 3D printer. So it's really interesting that you can actually take a 3D model, 3D print something, and glue the pieces together, and it actually resembles something from a game. Now, obviously, the Outbreak Prime is a model from Destiny the game, made by Bungie, and I'm really excited to get this project done because, honestly, this project is going to be long. It's going to be about maybe 10 videos long, maybe even more, and I really want to give you guys an in-depth look at how to actually do everything. Now, this tutorial guide, part 2, is pretty straightforward, but basically, you put the epoxy on a board or on a tile that you buy from the Home Depot or Lowe's down the street, and you mix them together. Spend about 30 seconds to a minute mixing the epoxy together really well. You want the epoxy to get kind of like a clear, snowy glaze to it. Now, both sections are really clear when you start mixing, and then when you mix the 2 together, they kind of become this cloudy, snowy type of material. Once you've got that down, you want to scoop it up as quickly as possible, put it on your model like we're doing here in the video, and you're then going to want to take that spatula type spreader that you have, or the stirrer, and you're going to want to also lay that smooth across the model's finish, and then take your 2 parts and press them together. You're going to actually see the entire process done here in the video, and it's really not that hard. It's as simple as that. You do have about 3.5 to 4 minutes of working time from the time you start mixing, so I recommend going as quickly as possible and not trying to glue multiple parts together all at once. You want to take it slowly. This process is going to take some time, and if you have a model that has a ton of pieces like this Outbreak Prime, you're going to want to do one piece at a time and set it aside and let it dry. Now what I do is I put the two pieces together, I use the desk as a support, and I push the two pieces together as hard as I can to try to remove as much excess glue as I can from in between the two parts. Now it's going to ooze out from the sides, but don't worry. Part 3 of this tutorial guide is going to be fixing all of that grime. So basically any glue that oozes out onto the edges, we're going to get rid of that in part 3, and we're going to make both those double pieces that are glued together look like one solid piece of plastic by the end of next episode. Now ultimately from there, you just put it off to the side and you wait for it to dry. Now I spent a little bit extra time on this piece due to the fact that both pieces have to be lined up perfectly because it is a gun barrel, and if it's not lined up perfectly, the gun model itself is going to look really wonky, and there's a lot of extra parts that hang off of the gun barrel. So if nothing is lined up appropriately, the Outbreak Prime wouldn't really look right, and the face plates would be all wonky and they'd be all cockeyed, and it's just a whole huge mess. So honestly, take two pieces, mix up a small portion of epoxy, glue the two pieces together, and by the end of it, don't worry, time's going to fly. You'll have all of your parts glued together, and then you'll be able to pretty much look at almost a finished product, minus the sanding and bondoing and sanding and more bondo and a bunch more sanding and a lot of primer. Okay, now while that piece is off to the side and drying, I wanted to show you the process that if you actually have a pretty big piece that you need to cover a lot of glue on, you can actually put the epoxy directly onto the model, mix it on the model, spread it around, and then put the two pieces together. You don't really need a piece of tile or a board off to the side to mix the epoxy on 100% of the time. In fact, if you do it this technique, you'll actually save epoxy and you won't waste it on the tile or the board that you're mixing the epoxy on. So I actually highly recommend doing it this method, but ultimately you can't do it for every piece. So Guardians, Privileged Ones, and YouTube, we are done. You learned how to mix 5-minute epoxy into a nice glue that can be applied to a model and glue two parts together. Seems easy enough, right? Well, next step, part 3 or episode 3 of the How to Build Outbreak Prime is going to be a bit more intensive. This is just part 2 of building a model, and I just wanted to give you guys a simple step before moving over to the difficult step. And I'm trying to break everything down for you guys into small videos. That way you get the idea of what to do next, and you can kind of work on the models that you're working on currently, if you are working on any, and kind of work alongside me. So I'm giving you a couple days in between to actually work on this, because these projects are not to be taken lightly, but they're really easy if you know what you're doing. So I'm trying to make it easy so you do know what you're doing. That way we can get it done. Now I'm going to go over the parts. So far we've got a portion of the barrel that's glued together, and we've got the back stock, we've got the trigger grip and guard setup that you will actually be holding. So this is the handle of the Outbreak Prime, and we've also got another portion of the barrel, the other half, being glued right now in the background. This actually might possibly be dried all the way. Yes. It is in the tacky state right now. So really quick, just to update you with 5-minute epoxy, what it does is when you mix it, you only have about 4 minutes to actually mess around with it, put it on the model, and glue two parts together. Make sure you read your instructions of whatever epoxy you're using. I am using 5-minute epoxy, but if you're using something else that's good with plastic, make sure you read the instructions. Ultimately though, I always use 5-minute epoxy. It just seems to work the best, and it's fast drying. But you actually get a tacky feel after about 4 to 5 minutes of drying time. Now you can still snap these two pieces apart. You have to actually wait a full max 4 hours before the entire glue is actually completely cured 100%. So just remember that. And then ultimately it's on to the third step, which is in the next video. We're going to be going over and making these parts look like a solid part. So right now this is actually obviously 3 pieces glued together, and we obviously can tell that it's been 3D printed. What we're trying to do is minimize the print lines, make them completely go away, make this model completely smooth to the touch, and we're also trying to remove the glue, the seam lines where 2 pieces come together, and just make this part look like a complete solid piece of plastic. And we're going to be doing that with all of the parts, because then we move on to the finalizing of the model and going through and doing a lot of detail work and getting into gluing all the parts together, painting, sanding, priming, and just getting a full-fledged Outbreak Prime in our hands. It's going to be incredible. Thank you all so much. If you enjoyed this video so far and the guides, make sure to leave a thumbs up. Also, try to show your friends this, because if they're into cosplaying or prop making and they don't know how to do this, then this is a good guide for them to learn how to actually do this. Again, prop makers and privileged ones out there, guardians, thank you all so much for the support. I actually recently just made a Patreon, so if you want the files to the Outbreak Prime, all my Patreons actually get it for free. So it's actually a free download if you support the channel. I'm actually going to be putting up the files tonight, so if you want to, Patreon is linked down in the description of this video as well. Ultimately though, anybody that does support me just by liking and viewing the videos, you guys are awesome. Okay, that's basically it. Part 2 is done on how to build the Outbreak Prime. Again, if you enjoyed the video, drop a like, leave some comments down below, share it with your friends, and as always, perfect time to subscribe to learn how to finish this, and also for daily Destiny content and future Destiny 2 information on this channel. As you all know, I cover Destiny 1 and Destiny 2 content on this channel religiously. And as always, stay violent and be privileged.
Oh, hi. VPG isn't here right now, but I guess you enjoyed the content. So over there is the logo you can click on. That will allow you to subscribe. More content up there, and behind the scenes daily content over here on the vlog channel. There you go. Enjoy.